Hi everyone, my name is John Lee. I'm a tax professor and CPA, and today I'm going to show you how you can save over $100,000 in less than 3 years using tax strategies. I've created this tool that I'm going to provide to you that will allow you to do a tax plan, a retirement plan, and a budget to make sure you can meet that goal of your tax plan. So, how in the world can you hit 100,000 in 3 years? And I'm talking, this is what I teach my students. I built this out for my master's class just to show them, look, the most crucial years for you to invest are the years right out of school. It's actually the years while you're in school. A lot of people don't have money when you're in school, right? But the earlier you can start, the better, because the hardest part of investing is getting enough money to where it's working on its own. You know, compound interest is the key, and it can take a long time to hit 100,000. So my new motto is sprint to 100,000. I want you to get there as fast as you can, and I'm going to show you why. On the sprint to 100K tab, you can see the example I gave. If you hit 100,000 in under 3 years, okay, 2.7 years you hit 100,000, you could literally stop investing for the rest of your career. And if you made a 7% return on that 100,000 and you started at 22, you would literally have 1.9 million by the time you were 67 without investing for the majority of your career. You only invested for 3 years, but the hardest part is getting that initial start where you hit that first 100K and then the money compound interest works and you can see exponentially. By the time you hit a million at 58, again, you're not putting any more money in, your money's working for itself. You'll hit a 2 million by the time you're 68. So you're getting 100,000 every year, where at the beginning it takes longer to make that initial money, right? So that's how compound interest works. That's why I want you to get there as fast as you can. I'm going to show you right now an example of how, again, I teach this to my master's students, and they make tax projections, and some of them are saying, look, I'm going to hit 100,000 in under 3 years, and I'm only going to save 69,000. That's understanding the tax code. There are so many tax advantages that you can use to have massive returns that you couldn't even imagine, much better than the stock market and other things. And I'm going to just show you how to do it, and you can do your own projections with your own income. So I'm going to show you the 2.7 year example first to get you excited here, and then we'll go through how to use this tool. So I'm talking about my students. They're accounting students or finance, so their average compensation after graduation is $72,000 right out the gate, which is pretty good. And what I'm telling them is, making 72, can you save 23? Because if you can, you will have over 100,000 in less than 3 years. How do they do that? Well, I'm just jumping through stuff here just to give you that first example. I'm going to have them, if this is a single student, put $4,150 in a health savings account, and then put $18,850 in a 401k. So what that does, so there's the $23,000 that they invest. Okay, with that 401k, most employers have what's called a 401k match, where if you put in, and in this case it'd be 5% of your salary, the employer is going to match that dollar for dollar. So you end up with that match, they'll give you $3,600 of free money by putting that $18,000 in. You could put $3,600 in this case and still get it, but you get that $3,600, and then both of these contributions actually decrease your taxable income. So as a single individual making $72,000, you're going to save $5,500 in tax. As a new grad, that's quite a bit of money, okay? $5,500. And what I'm saying is, grab that tax savings, rather than putting it in a checking account, throw it in your Roth IRA. So you throw that into a Roth. So by saving $23,000, okay, your disposable after-tax cash flows only decreased by $23,000. At the end of the year, you have $32,000 with that tax savings, with your 401k match. That's a $9,000 return, 39% return on your investment. Pretty amazing, right? On that sprint to 100,000, if you do that same strategy for 2.7 years, you'll hit 100,000. All you're saving is 23,000, but you understand how this tax code works, okay? How you get those tax deductions, how you maximize that 401k match. You got to get that free money, etc. I'm going to go through more projections to show you maybe your income's not that high, etc. You can do it for yourself to see where you'll fit in. And the last step, I love showing people these projections because it gets them excited. It's like, whoa, 100,000 in 3 years, I'm going to do that. Well, the last step is, now where does the rubber meet the road? You jump into the budget and you say, okay, if I want to save 23 grand, where am I going to cut my expenses? And you actually make a budget to make sure you can meet that goal. So let's start. I'm going to show you how to use this tool, okay, this projection tool. And we're going to delete our baseline values. And we're going to come to the very top. And we'll delete those as well, just to show you how this works. So to start off, read the disclaimer. I'm not responsible for this. You need to do your own calculations to make sure this works. And if you're super serious about huge changes, seek professional guidance. But this is a tool to give you information on how these laws work. Don't rely on it. I am not liable for any decisions you make with this tool. So complete the tax projection is the first thing, to see how much tax you could save in the current year. This is the amazing part, to show people, look, how much can you save just by doing a few of these strategies. So say we have a single individual, and state of residence, we have Utah. I've only built in Utah to the calculator so far. I am going to build in the other states, but if you're not in Utah, select your state and it'll just show 0 for your state tax that could be saved. So you need to keep that in mind. It may be only a federal projection for you if you're outside of Utah. So wages, tips, and other compensation, we're doing 72,000. And so the blue boxes, what we're doing is we're just filling in our tax information for 2024. So if you have a spouse, you put in their income, but in this case we're doing filing status as single, so you could select a different filing status there. If you have other interest income, dividends, capital gains and losses, put those in here. We're keeping it pretty simple. You can put in student loan interest payments and itemized deductions, and a lot of the retirement type deductions are going to happen later on. So that's the main information I want for our baseline values. So you can see we're starting pretty simple. We just have wages of 72,000. That's the salary at the first accounting job for one of my students, right? So then this is the baseline projection. So that 72,000, it's actually flowing into a bunch of the forms. Here's the Form 1040 for that single individual. And so you can see filing status is single. We'll say this is John Smith. We don't have wife there. So there's the income. And you can see there's the standard deduction for 2024. The tax is calculated. And there's the tax liability. $7,686 is the amount of federal tax this student's going to pay right out of school, right? They're paying that much in federal tax, 22% marginal tax bracket. State tax is $3,190. That's coming from their Utah tax return where they're paying 4.65%. Social Security and Medicare tax. So this is the first thing I want to open people's eyes to. You get a job offer for $72,000. You're already paying taxes of $16,384. You see how tax is going to be one of the biggest expenses in your life? That's a huge amount of tax, right? So you only have $55,616 to work with. Well, let's see if we can save some of that tax, okay? So that is our initial projection. For you, you can add, if you add a child, you'll see that changes, right? Our federal tax just dropped by $2,000 because you have the child tax credit. So, and then if you have a child that qualifies you for the earned income credit, etc., you can update those. But for now, we're just doing single, no kids. So our projection, here's an important step. Once you put your information here, your next step is you need to copy these values. So I'm just going to select them, right click, copy, and then in this baseline column, I'm going to select that top cell, right click, and paste values, that 1, 2, 3. The reason I want to paste values is that I don't want these amounts to change because I'm going to compare my projections to those amounts. So once you've pasted those values, you should see all zeros here. If you don't, you need to do that again. And make sure before you do that all of your information down here is blank. The percentages here aren't as important, but let's make sure they're blank anyway. but then that you haven't put in any projections or anything like that. So we're good there. So now that we have our baseline, 72,000, we're paying 16 grand in tax, okay? For me, I want to decrease that. I love supporting our government, but I don't want to pay more than I'm legally obligated to. So I would love to avoid some of that tax. So next step, I want you to put your employer match. So for those that, many of you will have a job that has a 401k match. And what that is the employer is encouraging you to invest in your retirement. They'll say for every dollar you put in up to 5%, we'll match 5% dollar for dollar. That's where you get 100% return on your investment. That's one of those investments that you'll find any financial professional say, get that match, always get that match, because it's 100% return, right? Where do you get that? There's different ways an employer may match your contributions. Automatic, some employers will say you don't even have to put money in and we'll put 5%. They're awesome, right? 100% match is saying we'll match 100% of up to 5% of your income. So we'll use that as an example. Others will have a tiered match where they'll say the match percentage is 100% up to 3%, and then tier 2 would be 50% up to 5%. Really, so they have like a 4% match. They do 100% of the first 3, and then if you give up to 5%, they'll do another 50% of that next 2. So whatever employer match you have, put it here. And you can see you don't put more than one. You got an error, only complete one of the options, 1, 2, or 3. So we're going to stick with just the straight 5% match offered by the employer. Okay, and this is for the taxpayer. If the spouse, and again, if you're a couple, do it for the taxpayer and spouse. In this case, single individual, so we're going to skip the spouse part. Next part, we're going to select the retirement accounts that you have, and then we're going to start doing projections. I've tried to simplify this enough to where you can see I have a ton of sheets here, like for a whole tax return. But I've tried to simplify and automate it similar to what tax software would do in order for you to do these projections for yourself. So let's select the accounts. And the first one I want to do, you've heard of the Roth 401k, right? So you're going to select, this is the normal 401k, so we're going to get rid of the HSA and 401k. And let's just say, what if you decide, and you hear Roth all the time, I've heard these financial professionals, they want me to put it in a Roth. So let's just say you put Roth 401k. So your projection, we're going to say, and employers, they can match a Roth 401k. So if we put equals, if we just want to get the employer match, the 100% match, we're going to take our income, 72,000, times 0.05, right? You could do that separately on a calculator. If you're good enough in Excel, you can just throw the formula in there. So I'm going to put $3,600 in my Roth 401k. You have to tell your employer, I need you to withhold that from my paycheck, and then you've put that money into your Roth 401k. What does that do? Well, let's look at our, if we just did that, Roth 401k match, you can see when we come down here to our savings, we have $3,600 in a Roth 401k and then $3,600 in a traditional match. So the Secure Act recently was passed in 2022 that says employers no longer have to do when they match they used to have to do it in traditional dollars, but that would be taxed later. You can actually elect to have it taxed as Roth as well. What that does, so if you put what percentage of the above employer match was designated as Roth contributions, if you wanted the match to be Roth as well, you'll actually be taxed on that. Okay, so if I put 100% match, so that match goes in, you can see, and now it's all in Roth. So I have $7,200 in Roth. But because that match is immediately taxable, you actually increased your tax by $1,000. We went from $16,384 to $17,391 because that match was taxed. So you can do either option, right? The other option was if we did 0 in Roth, if we have a match traditional, what does it look like? Well, you don't owe any extra tax, which is nice, and you have $7,200, half Roth, half traditional. You want to fill multiple buckets, and we'll talk about that later, why if you're all Roth, you lose so much opportunity not only to save tax during your career, but when you're retired, the majority of people are in a lower tax bracket. And I know there's everyone saying, whoa, you're going to be in a higher tax bracket. You might be, but the majority are in a lower tax bracket, and there's so many strategies to be able to save. But if you do all Roth now, you lose that opportunity. So fill different buckets, okay? So in this one, we filled 2 buckets. Look at our projection. For current age is 22, 7% return. It's going to take us 46 years to hit 100,000 if we use that strategy. And I'm going to take that back because I left in my original projection. That seemed really long to do that for the whole career. So I was saying only invest for a few years. Now, if you do that same strategy for your whole retirement, you are going to have, you'll hit 100,000 when you're 32. That's really not bad. That's much better than the majority of Americans, right? If you just saved $3,600 a year and got that match, right? And when you hit 100,000, half of it's taxable, half is tax-free. And then age for $1 million, 56, you still hit $1 million and half, okay? Let's say when you retire, you have 1.1 million in a taxable account. People are making you scared like, oh, that's taxable, they're going to tax it at 100% or whatever. How much of that do you have to take out? The required minimum distribution when you're 73, it's based on your life expectancy, but it'll be like 26.4 years, 43,000, okay? You think you're going to add your other income to that, but what tax bracket is that going to put you in? Right now it would be a very low tax bracket. So you need to keep those in mind. Even having $1 million in a taxable account might not be as bad as most people say it will be, okay? But that's why I want you to do these projections and make plans to make your own decision on it, okay? So that was, you're just getting your 401k match, or you're putting in a Roth 401k for your whole retirement. You have 2.2 million when you retire, saving $3,600 a year. Pretty crazy, right? But you're having to save that for your whole career, which isn't going to be that hard, $3,600 a year. But what does the average American do? What, $3,600 a year is not that much. If you just got a 401k match, you could have 2.2 million. Why isn't everyone doing that? First thing they do when they graduate is they buy a car, they buy a house. Their budget doesn't allow for it. The average American, if we look at it, average American single other making 60,000 is spending much more than that with debt and everything else. They're going in the hole. Everyone's living paycheck to paycheck. They can't save. If they could just save $3,600 a year and get a 401k match, they would change their whole trajectory. There are decisions you have to make now, okay? So there's our first one, the Roth 401k match. So what I'm going to do now is for each of those, I'm just going to copy my projection into projection 1. That was my first projection, Roth 401k match. Okay, so I'm going to go down. I don't need to make any changes up above. I'll just copy this projection here so I can compare that to all of my projections. You can see my rate of return on that was 100% with that Roth 401k plus the match. And so here I'll do the same thing. I'll copy that projection, projection 1, and again I'm pasting values because if you paste the formulas it's going to show zeros and everything, so you want to paste values for comparison. First projection already done. See how fast you can use this tool? Okay. Second one, 401k match, invest the tax savings in a Roth IRA. So here's a strategy. That last one we put it in Roth and we actually let the match be taxable. Let's get the 401k match, because currently we didn't save any tax on that last one, right? Because we did the Roth 401k. So I'm going to change this projection here. I'm going to do the normal 401k, or 403b, 457b if you have those, if you're in the education system. I'm going to do 3,600 here. Because if I do a normal 401k, that actually saves me $1,000 in tax just by putting 3,600 in 401k. I love that tax savings, right? And my match is traditional as well. So in this case, I have 7,200 in traditional that's going to be taxed later, but then I'm going to take that tax savings of 1,006 and I'm going to throw it in a Roth IRA. Okay, so I'm going to come here and say, okay, in my Roth IRA, I'm going to put the tax savings, 1,006. So how much did I save for the current year? And this this is your biggest return on investment, this strategy, okay? Because if you get that 401k match, you get 100% return, right? So 3,600, but then you take your tax savings and put it in a Roth, you only saved $3,600 and you ended with $8,206, okay? Where the other example we had 7,200. So you got 128% return on your investment, guaranteed. Why is that guaranteed? Well, you got that 401k matches, your company guarantees that, and then your tax savings is guaranteed. The tax law isn't changing this year, right? So 128% return. There's projection number 2. I'm just going to copy, Control C that, and over here paste values again so I can compare each of these projections, right? So, and where do you end up in your race to 100,000, right? Your sprint to 100,000, you make it about a year earlier, okay? And you're investing for your entire career at that same rate, so it's only a year earlier to 100, but your taxable balance is much larger with that strategy. But again, when you retire, there's options for using that taxable balance, so those are things to consider, okay? But if you're looking for more tax-free, maybe you do the first option where you'll actually pay extra tax to have that match go into a Roth, even up to you, right? But you end up with almost 2.6 million using that strategy. Okay, copy those. Just copy these ones as well really quick. Next strategy, 401k match, HSA max, invest tax savings in Roth. Okay, so we're using that last tax strategy, but we're going to make it even better. My students will tell you, HSA is my favorite tax savings account. It's the only account where you get triple tax savings. You save tax when you put the money in. You save tax as it grows. You're investing in it and it's growing tax-free. When you take it out, it's tax-free as long as you take it out for medical. Well, what do most retirees have? Tons of medical expenses. So a lot of people will use an HSA as a retirement account. They'll max out that HSA because once you retire, what if you're super healthy, you're running marathons, doing whatever? You can use that HSA money as you can convert it as a normal traditional 401k or Roth account where your distributions, you can pay tax on them if they're not medical. But because people have much more medical expenses when they retire, it's a very safe bet and the best tax savings account there is. Roth, you don't get a deduction up front. Traditional, you pay at the end. HSA, you don't pay, okay, if it's used for medical. So this next strategy, we're going to keep the match the same, and the tax savings is going to change because the cool thing about an HSA, if you have your employer take part of your paycheck and put it in an HSA, you get tax savings. I'll show you here. So the max HSA for a single individual is $4,150 for the year for 2024. You can double that, $8,300 for family plan, okay? So $4,150. If you do those two, how much tax do you save? $2,483. And look what taxes you actually saved. The 401k match, we actually saved tax on Social Security and Medicare as well by putting that money into an HSA, and also state and federal. So almost $2,500 in tax in 1 year saved. I love that because guess what I love to do with that money? Take that $2,483 and I'm tossing that in a Roth, right? In our other example it was only $1,006, but now we're doing $2,483. So how does that look for our returns? We invested $7,750. Okay, we did the $3,600 plus the HSA. We invested $7,750 and we got a return of $6,083 with that 401k match, and we saved $2,483 in tax. So you end up with 13 grand and you only invested $7,750. I love this stuff. It's amazing, right? In our projection, again, we're starting at 22, and you can change, if you're older, change the age, obviously. But the cool thing is the HSA grows tax-free, right? So what about your expenses now? Should you use the HSA now? You can. This would be off if you did, because if you're using those HSA dollars for current medical expenses, it's not going to grow as fast. One of the strategies is save your receipts, pay with your credit card, get points, don't go into debt for this, but pay debit or out of your bank account and save those receipts, because then later on you can just take a big distribution for those receipts at any time, right? You can get that access to that money anytime, but that allows you to grow it tax-free, right? So that's a strategy. The other strategy is, you know what, I love having that money. I hate when it hits my checkbook, so I'm going to take the withdrawals now. But then it's not going to grow as fast as this projection. This projection is assuming you're not taking distributions yet from that. You're letting it grow, and then you're going to get reimbursements later on. But look what you end up. You hit 100,000 when you're 28 years old, and you only save 7,000 a year. Okay, a million when you're 51. Retirement age, you're going to have 3.3 million by saving 7,700 a year. Crazy stuff. Okay, so let's copy that projection. It's just going to get crazier here. 3.3 million. And again, sprint to 100,000, you can see how fast you continue to invest. You hit $1 million when you're 51, 2 million when you're 60, less than 10 years, 3 million when you're 66. Crazy stuff. What's our next projection? And this is where I tell my students, you want to get there as fast as you can? This is the strategy I showed you at the beginning. So now that you kind of know how the tool works, what we're going to do is we're going to say, okay, I want you to save 23,000 to hit, so you're going to take, we know you need to do at least 3,600 in the 401k to get the match, but we're going to do a lot more just so we can save more taxes and then put more in the Roth IRA. So if the total we can put in is 23,000, or total investment for the year, I'm saying do 23,000 minus whatever you're putting in HSA, 18,850. So in total you're investing 23. What was our tax savings again? Well, now we're saving even more tax, right? $5,473 in 1 year. So we just saved $5,473. If you throw that into a Roth IRA, you are now, look at your savings. Total savings, that $32,000. This is the first example I did. $9,000 return on that. And you will have 100,000 when you're 24.8. $1 million when you're 40. How would you feel? This is like early retirement stuff, right? You'll have, I mean, look at how much you'd have. If you kept that same strategy, as your income goes up, what if you just kept that same strategy? You went crazy the first three years and you just kept the same strategy? You would have $9 million in retirement, okay? $7 million taxable, right? So if we did that $7 million divided by 26.5, we're talking about $267,000 taxable income. At today's rates, that'd put you, what tax bracket? Let's look at our tax calculation. As a single individual, you're looking at 35%, right? Which is a pretty high tax bracket. So maybe maybe you do a little more in Roth, okay? And that's another option. And this is the one I wanted to show you. Is invest 23,000. That's the fastest way to get to 100,000, and I put only invest until 100,000. So here's the other thing you can do with these projections, because that's going through your whole career. You're investing that 23 grand a year. In the sprint to 100,000, what I want you to do is just scroll down until your total balance, and let's just let's do view, freeze top row. So once our total balance hits 100,000, which is 24.8, let's stop. Oh, and it's going to be even more because I didn't have the HSA for the whole career. So if you're doing all three of those for your entire career, you're at $10 million. Crazy. 3 million tax-free, 7 million taxable. Well, do you need 7 million taxable? Maybe not. What if you just did that for 2.8 years and then stopped? This is why I say sprint to 100,000. You literally stop saving for the rest of your retirement, you still end up with 1.9 million, right? So here's another strategy. We have 1.3 taxable, 570 tax-free. What if you that 1.3 million, those required distributions aren't going to be too bad, right? And there's strategies. I have a client right now where his required distribution, we just give it all to charity, so he's never taxed on it, because he's going to be giving that charitable anyway. When you have millions of dollars, hopefully you're giving a lot to charity, and I'll hit that topic soon as well. But so 1.9 million. What about this strategy? What if you just decided to, instead of just to max out a Roth IRA, what if you just kept your Roth going, or that 5,400 in a Roth for the rest of your career? So you just saved 5,400 a year. You did 23,000 the first 2.8 years, and then 5,400 for the rest of your career. What does that look like? 2 million tax-free, 1.3 taxable. That is a nice, that 3.3 million, that's not too bad, especially to have that 2 million tax-free. These are things you can do. Start now. If you make those big expenses, you go into debt for these cars and houses and everything else, it makes it so you can't do these strategies. Just take the first few years and apply these strategies, and then buy the car. I just did that same thing. Applied these strategies for 4 years, and then bought a car. And my wife had to wait a little bit for that, but gosh, you do the groundwork early on, and then you reap the rewards later. But if you buy it right out of school, the groundwork's never done, and it's just a struggle to reach that goal. So I'm gonna save that projection. Projection 4. Okay. 1, 2, 3. And then and just for the sake of time, this is getting long. The only change I'd make on that last one is change this 18,850 to a Roth. Maybe I'll do it really quick. And I didn't save projection 3 either up there or here. I'm going too fast, but the third projection, go back and you could go through it and save it. Okay, what was my third projection? I'll just save it really quick. It's nice how fast this is. 401k match, so this was 3,600. HSA max, invest tax savings in the Roth, which was, what was my tax savings? 2483. 2483. Just so we can save all of these. Projection 3. And moving too fast, Excel's quitting. Dying on me now. Okay, so I'm going to split this into 2 videos because the next part's going to take probably 30 minutes as well. So let's just do the last projection. So invest 23,000 between Roth 401k and HSA Max. So we're doing HSA Max, and instead of the traditional 401k, we're going to do Roth 18,850, but 23,000 between the two, and then invest tax savings in Roth IRA. Only invest until you hit 100,000. So my tax savings changed. It's only $1,477, right? Because I'm not getting a deduction for everything I put in my 401k, so my tax savings is a lot lower, but it's all going into Roth, right? So I'm not going to have to pay tax later. So I invested $23,000. My return on investment's $5,000 with the 401k match plus the tax savings, so 22%, and then I end up retirement with 8.8 million, right? But now I have tax-free 7.7 and taxable is 1.1. So there's the balance. Really, the difference between the two accounts, if you're in the same tax bracket and you're reinvesting your tax savings throughout, you're going to end up in the same spot whether you do the tax-free or the taxable, the Roth versus traditional. Same tax rate, you're going to be in the same spot. Tax rates go up, you'll be worse off. If you're in a lower bracket, you'd be better off if you did traditional. So that's why you want to kind of balance those buckets and say, oh, is that tax-free bucket too big? Because then can I do much strategizing with that 1.1 million, charitable, et cetera, et cetera. Okay? So there's your last. I'm going to copy that. Projection number 5. Paste it there so you can compare. Like, we only got a 22% return on that last one, right? We're not using as much of our current tax savings to our advantage, but then we're not paying later. So these are all things to consider. So we'll copy each of our projections over. And the cool thing is you kind of see how this works. You'll be able to do these for yourself, change what your options, etc. The next video, what I'm going to do is go through the next 2 steps, which are there's a recommended budget. So based on the plan we just chose, we're gonna have a budget. And I'm liking this, I'm gonna take a risk and do pay tax later. So I'm gonna do the fourth projection. You pick the one you want to do, okay? And with the tax savings, I'm loving that tax savings now of, well, it says it here, 54.73, right? 54.73. So that's the one I'm going to use, and the next step is that is going to flow into our budget. So we're going to see, okay, now can we save that much money and make it work with our budget? And I'm going to walk through that in the next video. Hi everyone, welcome back. In the last video, I came to the conclusion that I wanted to do projection 4 of my, remember we did a tax plan where in my tax plan, making $72,000, my plan was to save $18,850 in a 401k, get that 401k match, and then max out an HSA as a single individual. From that investment of $23,000, that actually saves me $5,473 in tax in first year out of school. And then I'm going to take that tax savings and invest it in a Roth IRA. So that is my tax plan for the year. And what that's going to do for me, and I put cash, we're going to leave that cash blank for now, but is I'm going to have, my total savings is going to be $32,000. Where does that come from? I only saved $23,000, but because of the 401k match of $3,600, plus investing those Roth savings, I get a $9,000 return on my investment of $23,000. That is a 39% return, pretty amazing. And my plan was, for projection 4, if I do that, I'm going to stop investing after I hit 100,000. So I'm going to hit 100,000 in how many years? I will reach 100,000 in less than 3 years. So I only need to invest for less than 3 years at that fast pace. Then I will reach 100,000 when I'm 24.8, assuming I'm starting at 22. I'll hit $1 million when I'm 39. How many people are hitting $1 million under 40, okay? And this is if they continue investing for their whole career at that rate, okay? At that 23,000 a year, getting that extra, they would hit 10 million at 67. So normal retirement age hit 67 with $10 million, 7 million taxable, 3 million tax-free. Taxable balance doesn't worry me as it might worry some, because I know there's so much opportunity to use that taxable balance when you're taking it out, right? If I have 3 million tax-free, maybe I'm just using my taxable distribution. I can give 100 grand a year to charity and not be taxed on that, or 200 if you're married at that point. So there's so many things you can do. The other thing you can do is you can do Roth conversions. There's a lot of strategies you can do. If you decide to do all Roth now, you lose the opportunity to take advantage of the low tax brackets later on, 10, 12, right? Because, and assuming even if the tax brackets increased, you just lose the opportunity to do any tax planning later with that money because you went all Roth. So that's why I like filling both buckets. And how much you fill each bucket is up to you, but you want to have both options available. But remember, in this plan, I'm only going to 100,000, so I'm not going to end with 10 million. If I did that for my whole career, which 23 grand a year for your whole career, I bet you could do. It's a little hard at first, but as you start making more money, you could easily hit that. 10 million is not out of the question for people with that strategy. That's the crazy thing, right? But it's starting early. If you make all these big purchases early, go into a lot of debt, and stay in debt your whole career, that's what the average American does. And that's why half of Americans have 70,000 when they retire. Okay, crazy, and I don't want you in those shoes. So I picked that projection. I'm going to go to my Sprint to 100,000 tab, and right now I have that same investment strategy for the whole career. Okay, so it turns into millions of dollars. But I'm going to say, okay, after I hit 100,000, remember 100,000 is that key, that number I want to hit. After I get there, I'm just going to stop investing for the rest of my career. Okay, look, I'm putting nothing into retirement the rest of your career. If you can get a 7% return on that investment, which isn't super aggressive, right? You could pull that off. Then you end up with, what does that look like? 1.9 million at 67. What if you kept working until 73, 2.9 million? Compound interest, guys. Look, when you hit the number of years it takes you to go from 2 million to 3 million without investing anything is 5.3 years. That's That's amazing. Okay, well, we're not quite at 3 million there. It's two one. Let's do 1.9 to 2.9. 6 years to get $1 million without investing. That's compound interest. That's your money working for itself, and that's why it's exponential growth. As your funds get bigger, they just grow faster and faster. So get to 100K as fast as you can. Some people take 30, 40 years to get to 100K, and they only get these benefits for a few years before, yeah, they're retired and they don't have that opportunity anymore. Get there as fast as you can, because then you have the opportunity to take advantage of that compound interest. And so in this case, I only invest for less than 3 years, and I'm still planning on, whether you retire at 67 or 73, you could have 2.9 million at 73 and only invest at 3 years. Crazy stuff, okay? That's the strategy right now. And maybe later on I'm going to say, you know what? It's so easy to put in the max Roth. I'm going to do 7,000 divided by 12 in my Roth for the rest of my career, and now I'm hitting 3 million at 64, right? Like, but now my tax-free balance, 2.3 million versus 1.3. These are all your possibilities, and once you start doing this stuff, you'll catch fire and get excited about it, seeing those accounts grow and seeing the opportunities that are available to you. So where does the rubber meet the road? We made these cool projections, these cool strategies. Now you have to go out there and live on a budget to be able to hit that goal. So what does that look like? Well, I know people have a hard time budgeting, and so I created a budget in here as well. That's a pretty useful tool. I was super excited about it because I was like, man, when this came together, it's a tool that can show you exactly how much you can spend if you want to hit those goals, but then you put in your actual expenses like, oh my gosh, I am way over, I need to go adjust my plan, or I'm going to adjust my expenses because I want to hit that goal. And then month to month you track it and say, oops, I'm over on that, I'm under on this. Okay, so how does this work? Here's your budget, your household status, pick whatever your household, married, no kids, married, oldest child under 6. And the reason for this is just to compare yourself to the average American. Okay, so if we've been working for a single individual here, single other, the average American, you can see if I change this, that column will update. I have a VLOOKUP that's looking up the values for the average American based on the household status. So we're going to work with single. So the average American is making $60,879, and there's the tax they're paying, health insurance. We're just pulling all of this data from the Bureau of Labor Statistics. So we look at all of those expenses, charitable, et cetera, all the expenses, and we get down to debt. That wasn't given in the Bureau of Labor Statistics, so I did the average student loan payment and the average credit card payment. In the end, you're looking at negative $13,000 in the checking account. Remember how 67% of Americans are living paycheck to paycheck? There you go. And that's just the average single, but in most of the categories, you'll see they're in the negative in almost every one. They're putting money into the 401k, but guess what is happening? Why does the average retiree only have $70,000? A lot of times they're dipping into that as an emergency fund, and they're paying they're paying the tax on it, plus the 10% penalty, plus they're taking out their retirement. So these are things you do not want to do, okay? So there's your first column, average American. Column E, average American at your income level. So I didn't have that data, I just had the average American, so I just used the percentages. So charitable, average American, that single other is giving 3%, so I just made that 3% of your income after tax. Okay, so we use those same percentages to estimate what the average American is spending at your income level, which is not a bad strategy because of lifestyle inflation anyway. So as they're making more, they're usually spending more. So you can see at the bottom, with debt included, everything, negative 14,000. Again, paycheck to paycheck, but this isn't you. So what you're going to do is say, okay, now this is your recommended budget. I was super excited about this because it was a way that I could say, look, if you want to save 23 grand plus put 50 that tax savings, and at least you know your tax savings because you already projected that, put that tax savings in a Roth, so you only have to save 23 because that tax savings is a wash, right? You save 5,400 and then you put it in an account. But with those investments, how much do you have to spend with the taxes that you're paying? And you can see 31,000 is your disposable income for expenses to cover, okay? And as a college student, and this can apply to anyone. I talk to college students a lot because that is the prime time where you need to apply these strategies. Right when you graduate, when you start making money, it's immediate. And earlier, there's decisions you need to make as a college student that are crucial as well. And one of them is your student loan debt. If you're going into loads of student loan debt, I'm going to show you how that's going to prevent you from actually applying these strategies. So, but if you have, don't be worried. Just cut your expenses, get that paid off as fast as you can, and you can still apply these. It may just take an extra year or two, right? So you have $31,000 to work with. I tell my students that are in the undergrad, they're like, I could live on $31,000. I'm living on like $5,000 as a student. Well, a lot of you can see you're paying a lot more tax now, et cetera, et cetera. Your expenses increase when you get a job, right? But I've adjusted the expenses in order for you to reach the goal of zeroing out your expenses. And I actually I had an estimate in there, and I'll show you. This is based on a zero-based budget, okay? So your recommended column is if you want to come out with zero in your checking account at the end, but you've saved $32,000, that's what I want there. I'm going to let you adjust how much cash you want. And so in this cell, so like I want at least $1,000 in my checking. That's going to adjust your expenses even more. You'll have $1,000 less you can spend. So what does this look like? How does this column work? Well, you can see if you're making $72,000 and you want to save $23,000, this recommends average American at your salary level is spending $23,000 on housing. This recommends $5,000. So some of these things you're like, wow, that's unreasonable. Well, you have to live like no one else in order to make this happen, because after 3 years, you could literally be completely different than anyone else, where you can match them and say, look, I'll save as much as you are for retirement, but you've already done the front end work where you can be just like everyone else is, but you've already saved yourself $100,000 and guaranteed you're going to be a millionaire, right? So, but I want you to come in this personal override column, you need to adjust those expenses. I put in a few of my recommendations in here as well, because I think they're just good things to do. One of those is if you have student loan debt, I built in that you're paying 20%. You're putting 20% towards that debt every year until it's gone. So that's $12,000 towards your debt in the first year. If you have debt, I love my student projections that come in and say, guess what, Professor Lee? Override 0, 0, no debt. Look how much they have to spend now. Now they can spend $10,000 on housing versus or 5 or whatever it was, right? Because they have no debt. If you have debt, you need to work with that, okay? So but use this override column to put your actual expenses. And you can see how crucial it is. One of the things I built in is 20% towards debt. Because the sooner you're out of debt paying that, especially if you're in credit card debt, you might be paying 25% interest on that. You are just throwing your money away at that point. Credit card debt should be the first thing that goes. Get out of it as fast as you can. Student loans, there's lower rates, etc., but get out of debt. Free yourself from that burden. And look at Dave Ramsey or other financial professionals on recommendations, the snowball method, whatever it is. Get out of debt as fast as you can. So, but I'm built in 20%. Get it done quick. The other thing I built in that is a personal belief of mine is giving to charity. Okay? And Bible says 10%, so I put 10%, and you can see it's showing 7.9% of after tax. This depends on the person. Some people say give 10% of your gross, or you can, if you're putting a ton in your 401k, etc., that could mean you're limiting your the amount of money you're able to work with. So I don't see it as an issue to give 10% of net if you're putting all of that into a retirement account and you're going to pay charitable on that when you take it out. You don't have access to it now, so do you have an increase? Maybe not. But once you take it out, you could pay it. So varies on the person. I've done both. I've done gross, I've done net. So up to you, but I built in 10%. So if you're like, seriously, I'm not really that charitable, 0. I recommend against that because you'll find that I've worked on tax returns of very wealthy people that gave very little away to charity, and they have millions of dollars, and they're just in the habit of that. I would get in the habit of making other people's lives better because it'll come back to make you a better person. Okay, so look out for others, and you'll find your life will be a lot better. And you'll see financially you'll be better off as well, because you'll learn to work with your expenses and save, and you've already budgeted that amount to give to others to bless the lives of others. So those are the two things I built in. Everything else is just based on percentages. I just decreased it based on what the based on how much you want to save. So you can see one of the biggest wealth killers in America is vehicles. A lot of people will buy a vehicle right out of school, and there's some people that are paying $1,000 a month per vehicle. There's households that pay $2,000 a month. So if I put vehicle purchases at $2,000 a month, that's $24,000. Those people are the ones that are throwing away millions of dollars for a new vehicle. Okay, because that $24,000, remember, if we just did that for less than 3 years in a retirement account, it turns into $2 million. If you put it in a vehicle, it turns into $0 because vehicles lose their value so fast. So if you do that, you can see you're not going to be able to do your strategy because you're in the whole $22,000. So you'd have to go adjust some of these other expenses. So I want you to come in here and just make adjustments. I'm going to leave as is for now. I'll change a few things like tobacco products. Okay, I'm just going to drop that. I don't smoke here, but in debt, let's just say you're out of debt. We're like, okay, out of debt. So you can see as I'm changing these, I'm able to save even more in my checking, okay? And maybe my housing, $9,000 a month. I mean, you're living in pretty cheap housing. I even had a student say, look, parents are going to let us live in their basement. Gosh, if you showed your parents this and said, look, if I can save $23,000 a year and have $100,000 in less than 3 years, and then not, I mean, that front end loading, they'll say, look, you live rent free for 2.75 years and then pay us rent, right? Like do everything you can. And it's like the Charlie Munger quote, get to 100,000 as fast as you can. Eat rice and beans, do whatever you can to get there, because if you can struggle for just a couple of years, it changes everything. And the crucial years are at the beginning, right? Right now, when you're taking on student loan debt, that could be hurting your future. So look for ways to make more money during the summer. These are all decisions that will benefit you. So I made a few changes, okay? Left everything pretty much the same. And that, yeah, you get rid of that housing, it gives me $10,000. So we're going to assume we're still paying $9,000 in housing. And maybe we'll even put that up to find a cheap place for $1,200 a month. And maybe people are like, you're crazy, $14,400. So look, if you're doing that, $3,961, I'm still going to have to find an area to save in here. So you need to make adjustments. So that's where you're making your adjustments. But the goal is end here with more than zero, because if you're at zero, you don't have access to these retirement funds. The Roth IRA you can pull your contributions from, but if you're pulling money from that, then you're killing the compound interest that you want. So don't live paycheck to paycheck. Make sure you're in the positive here. So then the last step, so you've built your budget. This is your personal budget now for the year. You're saying, if you have a spouse, whoever it is, you're like, if I hit this, amazing things are going to happen, okay? So there's your budget. Now, the rubber meets the road. Expenses, month one. And at some point, I'm going to have this automated so you can link your bank account and all that will come through. But for now, sometimes it's best. It's so easy to download your bank activity from your bank, copy and paste it in column C and D, okay? So this would be, it would come through with a description, right? Salary, church, let's say Smith's, you know. So you've copied your bank data in column C and D, and then what I want you to do is there's a drop down list of all of those expenses from the budget, right? So you just come down and select, okay, that was my church donation, so I'm charitable tithing. When you classify all of these in this column, it's going to pull that data, it's going to sum it, right? If I do to grocery store, 583 in the budget column for month one, you can see this is your last step, where when you track those expenses, it's going to pull them into this monthly budget, right? And for your annual projection, if you're doing through month one, you just select month one here, and then based on your expenses for month one, you can see it'll highlight green if you're on track for your goal, red if you're not. So if I spent $583 in month 1 and my goal was only to spend $1,900 on groceries, again, kind of low. These are the adjustments you'll have to make. I'm over, it's highlighted red. So the next month, and you can see if I only spent $50 the next month, and maybe some of these seem unreasonable, but I'm just showing you for an example. Once you put month 2 expenses in, you want to put them all in. I only have groceries of $50, but just to show you how this works, you want all your expenses in, but with just $50, watch the grocery store, because everything else is likely going to turn green because it'll be taking 2 months into account. You can see for groceries, the annual is $37.99, so even spending $50, way less, I'm still over budget on that. So based on the month you're in, make sure you select your annual projection there, and it'll show you, am I on pace or not? And that's where the rubber meets the road. That's where you say, okay, I only have this much to spend on this. How can I make that happen? And yeah, this is the tool I've created, and I'm excited for you to use it and see where you can get. I love seeing students give me projections and say, look, in under 3 years I'm gonna have 100 grand, but you know what, I think I'm gonna try to keep that up for my whole career. And then it's crazy the things you can accomplish just understanding these concepts and understanding how it works, but then applying them, right? Creating a budget, if you have a spouse, creating it with them and say, look, this is where we're at. It's amazing. It reminds me of eating, your nutrition plan as well. It's amazing how much, when you start tracking calories or macros or whatever it is, the first time I started doing that, I was like, wow, I can't believe how much fat I eat. I love cheese, you know, I just eat so much cheese, and this is how many grams of fat. And it was so easy to cut that fat because just understanding, gosh, this is how much I'm spending on this. That's ridiculous, right? When you understand where your money is going, then you can make changes with that. So that is the budget aspect, and you'll have access to this if you look in the notes to this video. I'm giving everyone free access to this right now. So go ahead and access my website, download it, and see how it works for you. Do a projection, look at how much you'll have in retirement, and then go through the budget process. Please reach out with any questions you have on it. I'm super excited to share this with you, and have a good day.